Ramazan, nerede rahat edersen, nerede rahat edersen. Yer buluruz onlara da, yer buluruz. Mesele değil. Batu, orayı bizim çocuklara bırak. Şimdi yani bu sırayı doldurarak. Estağfurullah. Yok hiç zararı yok Özge Hocam. Çok arkaya gitmeyin. Yani dolu olan yerlerin arkasından tamamlayın. Good afternoon. This year is again another very important day for all of us. We have with us our guest, Professor Perullo. The introduction will be done naturally by President Tunç. Let's give him a hand also at the same time. This has been a nice organization by the club, but we must really take into consideration that it was our own Özge Hoca who has done all these things. This event is organized among the 10th year of the university also there. Now, I think, Tunç Başkan, shall we wait a little more? Maybe we should. Maybe we should. Nasıl istersen.
would like to welcome you to our exclusive seminar organized by School of Applied Sciences and Gastronomy and Culinary Arts Department for our university's 10th year anniversary. Today, we are honored by presence of Professor Dr. Nicola Perullo. Professor Perullo is Rector's Delegate for International Relations and full professor of Aesthetics at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy, Polenzo. Additionally, he is Director of PhD program in Ecogastronomy, Education and Society. Also, he is Director of Master program of Gastronomy, Creativity, Ecology and Education program. Today, Professor Perullo will be making a presentation about what food can be, when food can be an art. And now, I would like to welcome Professor Perullo to the stage.
So, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you to the faculty and to Professor Samanci for this very nice occasion for me to be here. It's a pleasure always to be in Istanbul. I love this city, of course. It's one of the most incredible places in the world, I think. Also for food, not just for food, but also for food. And so now I'm going to speak about a strange topic, apparently. I don't know what you are expecting from this topic, and maybe I'm going to talk of something differently from what you expected. Because the title is already strange. You see that the title says, when food can be an art. So I assume that food sometimes can be an art, because otherwise I wouldn't make this title. And this is already something that I have to explain, because according to many people and laymen, but also scholars and researchers, food cannot be an art. Cuisine, cooking cannot be an art. So first, I have to say something about this, and then I will tell you something about my idea, so my theory, when food can be an art. But watch it. I'm not talking about the general relation between food and art, because this is a different topic. Art and food they have a long history in paintings, in sculpture, in many arts, in many fine arts. Food is represented, is an object or representation. This is a very interesting topic, but for reasons of time, I decided to speak about a different one, another topic. The topic has to do with making food, with the real food, not with represented food. Not food in literature, not food in sculpture, not food in painting, but real food. Food that we cooked and that we eat. So the question is this food sometimes an art? And as I told you, I say yes. And when it is the case. I am a philosopher, so my approach is an approach that, of course, is pretty much theoretical and conceptual, but I have a long long and maybe now too long experience in food, gastronomy, and cuisine. I started to be in the field 25 years ago when I was pretty young. And I practice a lot, also food, cooking, and cuisine. So I am saying something that is conceptual and theoretical, but it is based on many practical and experience issues. Believe me, and of course, I will make some examples, and then you can make me some questions about this, but this is my line of argument, something that is at the same time theoretical, but stems from an empirical arguments and empirical perspective. I wrote something about this issue, but the main book that I wrote about food and art is in Italian language. There is an article that is in English, was translated in English, in an American book, and the book is called The Taste of Art. It's a collection of essays, and there is also an essay of mine that is the summary of the Italian book about this topic. Okay, so let's start. I prepare some slides to help the line of thought that I want to address. Let's go back to the root of the question. This is a very simple question, and it is not just a philosophical question, because many times, even today in journal, magazine, there is this kind of argument. The chef is an artist or not? The chef is an artisan or an artist? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe this is a very Western question. I don't know about Turkey, and this is interesting to know later about Turkish culture. But I say that this is a very typical Western question because, for example, in Far East, in East culture, Japan, China, and the like, this question doesn't make sense. For Japanese culture and Chinese culture, it is obvious that creating food is an art. So we have to take this in mind, because according to the traditional Eastern thought, we can make an example for the Japanese culture. For example, the sushi master is an artist. They don't make, in this culture, the distinction between art and artisanship. But in our Western culture, that unfortunately became a dominant culture and the colonialistic culture, as you know, we follow a different history. So, of course, this idea of Western culture, this is art or not, spread out all around the world a little bit. And so, I don't know what about Turkey, but also in the Eastern country today, there is this idea. According to this idea, we can start to see this is or not. Well, maybe not, someone may say, or it depends. But today we are facing with these examples that come from different kind of cuisine. Here you have a simple plate of a regional, traditional plate of pasta of Italy. So something that seems very simple. And here you have fine dining, you have avant-garde. And you have on the left side a very famous signature dish by Ferran Adrià, very famous chef, one of the most important chefs of the last 50 years from Catalonia. The caviar of melon. And on the right side, you have another very strange recipe by an Italian chef called Davide Scabin. It's the cyber egg. So it's a raw egg with a plastic around. And then you eat this with a bisturi and in a bag. So it's something that is very much related to design and to a certain idea of creativity. So some people may think that this is not art, because art has to do with different ways of elaborating things, of creativity, and this maybe is art. These are open questions, and I want to give you some of my ideas about this, no? But the same kind of questions, this is important, came up in the last century in the history of art in general. So not just food. So some people may say, well, this is not art, but this is real food. This is good. This is something strange. I will never eat this because doesn't seem food, no? And the same kind of argument you can find in the history of art. Some people may say, well, this is art. The Pietas of Michelangelo. Everyone can see that this is a piece of art, a wonderful piece of art. On the other side, this is art. Well, here people start to argue. Contemporary art, this is Andy Warhol, famous tomato soup. Well, for some people it is art. For other people, this is not art, because the argument is everyone can make this. Here you have a skill, you have some technique, very difficult to achieve, so very few people in the world can make something like this. And here, why I put this in combination? Because you can see something similar. Okay, to make this very well, you need technique. You need a strong technique to pasta, everyone can make pasta, but the best pasta in the world or an outstanding pasta, you need some skills. Here, what do you need to make something like this? You need technology, you need a design, you need a certain idea, but maybe technique, no, or in a very different way. The technique with hands. You don't work a lot with hands to prepare this. You work with the ideas and with the instruments. Here you have caviar of melon, the juice of melon, squeezed melon, and then the spherification of melon with the help of an instrument, of a machine, to make this. And it's different, no? And here the message is, it is just melon, but it is precious as caviar. So you see that here you have a dish that wants to transmit a message. And here it is the origin of life, a raw egg, and you open it and you eat this. Of course, it can be good, but this is not the main This is not the main point of this dish, to be good. The main point of this dish is to provoke a certain emotion, is to give a certain thought. Here, the beauty. This is a work of art because it is outstanding, beautiful. Here is not the beauty. The main aim of this is to provoke, to transmit a certain message about the consumistic culture, about the pop society, and so on. So you see that there are similarities between certain way of making food in the last decades, contemporary food, and this contemporary art started in the last century, from the 20s of the 20th century, from Marcel Duchamp on, the idea that you can make art with everything, okay? So there are analogies between the debate about food and art and the debate about art and contemporary art in general in Western culture. And this is why these questions came up. Go back to the roots of Western culture. So normally, especially from a philosophical point of view, when we talk about roots, we go back to Plato, Aristotle, Greek philosophers. And if we go back to our questions, to our question about food is art, we find these suspicious minds at the roots of this. Plato is very telling. Cookery, he said in one dialogue, is a form of flattery. And I claim that this kind of thing is bad because it aims at what is pleasant, ignoring the good. And I insist that it's not an art, but a routine. Because it can produce no principle in virtue of which it offers what it does. Rhetoric is to justice what cooking is to medicine. This is not just historical, philological thought. It's something that many people today also think. Food is just like fuel, medicine. We eat to nourish our body and to survive. And all this discussion about good food, about fancy food is flattery, is something rhetorical. So food is important to survive, is important for our biological needs, but nothing more. And a lot of people also today think like this. And you see, Plato makes this analogy between cooking as an indulgent pleasure and rhetoric. Rhetoric is to justice. So for social life, justice is important. Rhetoric is just blah, blah, blah. And eating is important as medicine. Cooking and the chefs and the recipes is blah, blah, blah. This is the starting point of the prejudices against cooking as something important in cultural terms and also in artistic terms. So it's not an art, but a routine. According to Plato, this is just a routine. The chef is someone that is like an employer that just makes things. Art is something different. This is a strong prejudice. This is a very strong prejudice. I show you that, of course, at the time of Plato, these kind of things didn't exist. And so today we are in a different situation. But I want to show you, and I anticipate my conclusion, that also this can be a work of art. But this is the end of my argument, okay? So, Plato, And if we move philosophically to another very important quotation to show that I am a very cultivated and philosophy professor, normally a quotation from Kant and Hegel is always at stage. So I just make a quotation from Hegel. Lectures on Fine Arts. The sensuous aspects of art is related only to the two theoretical senses of sight and hearing, while smell, taste, and touch are excluded. You find here another important point. Art cannot be food because art is just for sight, for the vision, and for the hearing, so music or visual arts. Sculpture, painting, and then, of course, architecture. This is very important to understand why food is not considered art. This morning we made a lecture about taste. Taste, for this tradition of Plato, Hegel, and most of the thinkers of the Western tradition, taste has been considered a minor sense, a sense that was not so much important, not like sight, not like hearing. This is for knowledge, true, and also for vision. Why? And also for art. Why? Because vision is something that we can share. I see a door there, and you see a door, and if I see that instead of a door there is a horse, you may think that I am mad, that I am crazy. But when I eat something and you eat the same thing, everyone has his own experience of what is eating. Taste, as I say this morning, is different. We can share taste, yes and no. We can share something, but then there is an intimate relation with our body. It's a complicated stuff, but just to say that visual arts have always been considered the real arts. And the art of the touch, of smell and taste, only very recently became part of the art domain. For centuries, it was not like that. But then, again, in analogy with the history of art, food, this is Marcel Duchamp, 1917, The Fountain. This is, the title is The Fountain. Richard Matt is the pseudonymous of Marcel Duchamp. When Marcel Duchamp did this, he opened up a new space for art. People were disappointed and were offended by this. How can this be an art? He did nothing. He just took something that has a different function, but this was the genius of the idea. When you do something that no one did before, in a certain time, in a certain moment, this is the geniality. Of course, if you do it now, doesn't make sense, because he did it already 1 century ago. But at that time, that was something totally new. And so you see that art started to be different from what Plato and Aristotle thought in a and Hegel thought in a certain way. And this is also, again, Andy Warhol, Brillo Box, 1964, same kind of thing. So many philosophers and many historians of art, they started to look at contemporary art with new eyes, and they started to try a definition of art. to be very short, this is also quite technical, so don't read them all, but some theorists like George Dickey or Arthur Danto, to put shortly, they say that something is a work of art when the art world accepted it. What is the art world? The art world is made by different actors. Art world is artists, curators, traders, and the public. And we can see in the cooking, what is the cooking world? Chefs, restaurants, guides, institutions, and of course the public. When something is accepted, they say, okay, we cannot find a definition of art according to some specific formal definition, because what is in common between this and this? Nothing. So this is in a museum or in a church, and this is in a museum. So how we can make this? The idea is that today there is a situation, cultural, historical, that for a certain set of reasons accept this to be art. Okay, and art is what an art world accepted this as art. This is a solution that seems to be very trivial and banal, but has some sense. Art is not just what you think it's art. It must have an agreement. So, 1964, this is how art changed in the last century. To arrive to these things accepted by an audience, Ferran Adrià was considered to be the best chef in the world for many years, and also Scabin, one of the top chefs of Italy, of Europe for many years. To arrive to this, something happened in the history of art and food. And a very important moment for the Western European culture was this. This is the Futurist Cuisine Manifesto. The Futurists were artists that in 1932, very important Italian artists, but also very important in Europe, in 1932, they make a manifesto of futurist cuisine in which they theorize that cuisine was the most complete art of all because it involves all the senses, not just sight, not just hear, but also touch, taste, and smell. So they totally turned the position of Plato and Hegel down on the other side. It's not only that cuisine is an art, but is the most important art of all, because it's the only art that involves all the senses. And this is true. If it is an art, it is true that it is the only art that involves all the senses. And so they say that is a Gesamtkunstwerk, is a total work of art, because it involves all the senses, as well as imagination, memory, emotion, so a lot of other things. So they started to use cuisine and food, and they were cooking real. They were making real performance with food. They had a restaurant for a few years in Torino, in Italy, and also they organized in theater some performances with food. And it was the beginning of the eat art movement. They started to make, like here, no? We can organize a plate, a desk with plates, with recipe, and you start to eat. And this food is made by artists. It's not made by chefs, but artists that use food. And it was a revolution in this sense. And this was also continued by the movement of eat art in the 60s in Germany and also in England, in Italy, in France, and then in US by people like Daniel Sperry, Joseph Beuys, and new artists like Rirkriti Ravanja. They start to make cooking performance, these artists. They use food as a normal means to make art. These are two examples. You see that here, déjeuner sous l'herbe means the breakfast below the grass, and it is a sort of irony of the famous painting of Manet, the déjeuner sur l'herbe. It was a picnic on the grass, and here they make a sort of, they swallow a sort of grave, and then also this very important artist, Rirkriti Ravanja, that started in the 90s to organize food performances in the museums, very important museums. Today there is an installation of him in the MoMA Museum of New York. The idea is, I bring food in the institutional space of art, so museums. And so people started to see food, and he was cooking in this museum, and he was giving food to the people. And then the idea was to share food with the audience and also to talk, to give an idea of conviviality, to use food as an artistic expression, as an artistic tool for some purposes. And there are different purposes. Purposes can be conviviality, can be some political messages, can be different. Different messages. Between the 60s and the 90s, art changed a lot, of course, and also food was started to be included in this transformation movement. And this helps very much the question about food, can food be an art? Of course. Well, I am mixing in this presentation, as I told you in the premises, food in art is food as a representational object in sculpture and painting, and so food is not eaten. Sometimes we have situation, that one that I just showed you, like this, in which you have real food cooked and eaten, but not made by chefs, but by artists. And we can call this art in food. And why I make this distinction? Because, of course, if an artist makes this, its main purpose is not to make good food, but to transmit some messages. People don't go here for this Tiravanja performance to have a great palate experience, but because of some communication and the idea of something new. And of course, as some of you are chefs or want to become chefs or cook, the problem is that you cannot open a restaurant, or you cannot work in a restaurant, or you cannot work as a cook if you serve disgusting food. You will close after one day. If you open a restaurant and the food is not considered good, you have two choices. One is to close the restaurant, and the second one to change the way you cook. because there is a monetary exchange. There is a sort of, people comes to you to eat good food. In the case of artists, people goes to the artist for the sake of art, not to eat good food. So there is a distinction. And now I want to go back to the first and main question of my speech, which is about food. Cuisine can be art in our ordinary practice, not made by artists, but made by people, by chefs, cooks, on people that cook at home also. So this is the point. Food has been accepted as an artistic expression in contemporary art, but the question about food and art in the sense of cuisine as art is still very ambiguous. Of course, if we look at this from a general perspective, why this is art has been accepted, not by all, by many people as art, and this no. If this is art, I'm sorry, if this is art, it's a box of washing soap is considered art, why we cannot consider art a dish of pasta? It's an everyday object. It's an object that has not to do with some superior stuff or metaphysical experience. It has to do with pop culture and pop life, everyday life. So this is a point that is important to start with. And from this, from all these questions, issues, problems, and there are many points that I will need to deepen, but I have no time, so I prefer to go quickly to the points that I want to show you now. I started to develop an idea. My general point is that there are no arguments against the fact that cuisine cannot be art in general. Because if we accept that Brillo box is art, if we accept that some performance, for example, Marina Abramović performances, is a very famous contemporary artist, and they make performance that just last 2 hours or 1 hour. So if we accept a lot of things art today, there are no, in principle, reasons to deny the fact that cuisine can be art. But how and when? So let's start from this statement. When I say that cuisine can be art, I'm not saying that all the food, all the cuisine is art. Otherwise, everything is art. And if everything is art, we can just close the definition, and art is what is art for me, so we don't have to talk about this. If this is your position, we don't have anything more to say. Art is a social concept and philosophical concept that we have to make distinction between what is art and what is not art. So, cuisine can be art if there is a cuisine that is not art. My idea is that we have to put this statement in a correct historical and theoretical context. This leads us not to simply ask if cuisine can be art, but when cuisine becomes art. My idea is that it doesn't depend on styles. is not that just Ferran Adrià cuisine is art. This is because fine dining cuisine occupies maybe the 0.00001% of the cuisine in the world every day. So doesn't give enough, for me, argument in favor of this. I also like this cuisine. I also like Ferran Adrià invention and originality, but it's not the main point. So it's not a question of style, but it's a question of how you make the process. This is the first point. Cuisine is, for me, is an art a posteriori, which means the après coup. Only you make a dish of pasta, and after that has been tasted by a community of people, that can be 2, 5, or 1 million, it can be recognized as art or not. You cannot say this in advance. It depends on the whole process and also the people that are eating this. I will show you later. So this is the first point. The notion of art. Cuisine can be art if art is meant in its double sense. The word art, it is very important to say, in Western culture covers at least 2 different semantic fields. One is art in the original Greek sense of techne. Art for 2,000 years, at least, from the old Greek antiquity, Plato, till Renaissance, meant technique. The way to make things properly. The skills to make things properly. You are an artist if you are very good in making something, even if you are copying someone else. The idea that artist has to do with something original is in Western culture very new, started in the modernity, in the 16th, 17th century with Renaissance, and with artists that wanted to be free and work for their own. Before that, artists, like cooks, they worked for other people. They were employers. And art was in the churches, in the symbolic spaces, was not about museums and by private, and then this is a work of art, they stay there, they contextualize. For many centuries, art was always in a context, in a social, historical, religious, political, or philosophical context. And so, art has to do with technique, and only later became linked to originality and innovation. And in Western culture today, we think mostly of this kind of art as originality, and then we invented the distinction between art and artisanship. But in ancient Greek culture, for example, if you make very well the shoes, you are an artist. If you work well with wood, you are an artist. If you are great with jewelries, you are an artist. And if you are a cook, you are an artist. If you cook well, you are an artist. And then, at a certain point in Western culture started this separation between art as the realm of freedom, total individual and then capitalistic freedom, of course, and artisanship that is something that has some function, some practical function. But it is very modern. And as I told you at the beginning, in Japan culture, there is not. Sushi master is an artist, and ikebana makers are artists. And we lost this. And I think that we should recover, we should restore this tradition and mix it, the old meaning of art with the new meaning of art. They are both good for food and cooking. One does not exclude the other. We can have great chefs and artists with traditional, simple food and with strange and innovation food. Both are legitimate. It depends on how you do it. And this is a very important point. And this is connected to the third thesis, to the third point. Cuisine can be art if it is meant in terms of fascination for the new and reminder of the well-known. Sometimes people, especially my students, they think that if you do something very traditional, it is boring, it is not, enough fascinating. But this is not true. There is a strong connection of taste and successful dishes with memory, background, and what is called cultural identity. That is not something fixed, but is something that is connected to many things. But of course, we can understand what this means, no? We have to be aware of the fact that both situations are possible. Comfort food can be outstanding and emotional as original food and shock food. It depends. So all my difficult arguments at the end have just one answer. It depends. It depends. It depends. You cannot know in advance. You have to experience this, to make the experience, and then after the experience, you may say something about that. This is very important. Cuisine can be art if art frees itself from the domain of visual perception. We are in a society and in a culture that is dominated by images, and visual perception dominated us. Not just in food, everything. You know, food Instagramming, Instagram and the sharing of food through social network. People wrote a lot in these years about this. And so sometimes people think that cuisine can be art if it is beautiful to see. Oh, look, the caviar of melon. It is incredible. Look at the forms and the colors. It is so beautiful that it's a pity to destroy it and to eat it, no? Oh, this is the prejudice of visual arts. This is the idea that art is just vision. But, as some philosophers say in the past, some people say, there is an art of digestion. There is an art of physiology, of taste. There is an art of energy. When we eat food, it is not true that food disappears. Food disappears as a visual appearance, but food remains because it becomes part of us. It becomes energy and metabolism. And also memory, and from a psychological point of view, it remains. So food does not disappear at all, even if it is consumed. So consumption is apparent consumption. It's like the law of physics, no? The transformation of the material world. It's not consumpted, it's transformation, no? And food is the same. It's a chain of transformation. So when we eat food, we are part of this transformation. We have to go beyond the idea of vision. And of course, vision is important, but it's not the main point, and it's not the only thing in food. So the fact that a cuisine is art is also if, for example, allows us to live better, healthier, well-being. Well-being is an aesthetic properties. Good digestion is an artistic quality. This is quite strange to say, but this is what I think. Cuisine can be art if the everyday and the ordinary are not its negation. Again, I also say something about this. Sometimes we think that every day is something and art is something that is extraordinary. In my opinion, cuisine is a very good tool for becoming artist of everyday life. It's an art of everyday life, something that we can practice every day, professionally or a domestic domain. So everyone can cook, of course, not professionally, just a few people are professional cooks, but even at home. I know a lot of people, especially in Italy, that are very much, they want to be expert and food critics. They go to eat every day in restaurants, and then at home they eat horribly. They are not able to cook one egg, and they are not able to do anything. They just eat out. Well, I think that we should start to think again to make art at home through food. It is a sort of creativity of ourselves. It's like when people start to make yoga or drawing. We can use food for this. And it's very important. This can have artistic consequences for our own, let's say, cultivation and for the cultivation of the people around us. Cuisine can be art if the cuisine does not reduce taste to emotion and concept. This is very important. The contemporary cuisine, the cuisine of fine dining, the cuisine alla Adria or Noma, Reggiani, sometimes is too much focus on giving shocks. So it's not important that I give you good food, but it's important that you, have the so-called wow effect. You have to be astonished. And then in the end, you taste many different things, and you don't remember what you have tasted, but just remember the experience, the overall experience. Oh, it's a sort of continuous bombing of emotions. Boom, 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 boom. And this has to do with our age that is called aesthetic of capitalism. People get bored very easily, and so they think that they need new emotions every 50 seconds. And I know some chefs, young chefs, 25 years old, and then they start to cook, and then they say, well, yes, this dish, I make this dish for 2 months, but now I make something different because I was already bored after 2 months. This is very typical of modern or late modernity, of people that need always to be dragged by emotions. In the Eastern culture, we have this chef, Jiro, the sushi master. There is a movie, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I suggest you, if you don't know this. Jiro is a 3 Michelin star. Now he's about 90 years old, so he's not cooking anymore, but his son is cooking in the restaurant. This 3 Michelin star in Tokyo, only 12 seats, very high restaurant. But the important thing is the biography. He started to make sushi at 8 years old, and when they made the movie a few years ago, he said that he wants to continue to make just sushi because he's in searching of the perfect sushi. He didn't find also, even now, the perfect sushi. So the idea is to always self-improve the skills, the technique, and the attention and the care for things. And you never get bored of doing the same things because it's never the same things. And we also have in Italy, this tradition of pasta makers with hands. And it's not boring. It's not a repetition. It's a creative act. And this is very difficult to understand for people of 20 years old that I have students that are fantastic, but they cannot be concentrated on the same subject for more than 1 minute. Sometimes my exercise, you know what is my exercise sometimes? One exercise that I make is just stay still on your chair, do nothing, firm, like this, for 2 minutes. They get crazy. They cannot stay without doing nothing for 2 minutes. But if they do this, they will become great cooks because they start to canalize the energy and to think in a different way. So it is important to, and I make in this book a distinction between emotions like surfing that is very quick and passion. You should have more passions and less emotions. It means that you should rooted your emotion in something that go deeper in a vertical way rather than horizontal. This is very important for a different idea of art and cuisine. I'm almost at the end. Cuisine can be art if it cuts across the problem of gender. You may ask, what is gender about? We are talking about art, we are talking about food, what the gender issue? Well, as you know, in the last centuries, since the invention of the restaurants in the 18th century in Western culture, and also today, if you see the fine dining scene, the creative chefs, 95% are male. Why they are male? Because there is a sort of circularity between a certain idea of creativity, design, using the mind, create new things, and the gender. Normally, from a gender point of view, I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about gender. This is this essential distinction. Female are more related, are more linked to, let's call this traditional cuisine or a certain way of cooking that is transmitted in a different way. Male have created a system in which if you want to be an artist, you have to create something and you have to create something new. You have to follow a certain path. And I would like more men to cook traditional dishes, home cooking, and also female, they can cook creative dish in a original method. This is not a problem. The problem is the overcross the hierarchy between professional chefs, male, that make very artistic thing, and simple food, female, osteria. The tradition of osteria in Italy is like this. So I don't know if you have the same problem in Turkey, but this is very, very, very massive in our tradition. So cuisine can be art when it takes into account also the importance of the interested relationship it has with food, which has its origin in the maternal gesture of feeding, an act that brings well-being. I'm not saying that women should just be mother and give milk to the baby. It's not the point. The point is this maternal gesture of feeding, if we are here, it is because someone fed ourselves for free without giving money back. This is a dogma. We didn't pay our food when we were born. And this is very important because it means that the original imprinting of food is free of money. And this is something that we should remind when we cook for other people. And of course, we ask money in return. But there is something in the original act of food that is beyond the exchange. It is a gift. And this has to do also with the question of gender and so. The last 2 points, and then I have finished. Cuisine can be art if the author and the signature are crystallization of relations. This is complicated. What is the point? I think that the art in cuisine is not an object, is not a plate, but is a process. A process that begins earlier than the kitchen. Because to be very, very clear and very scientific, when we say that a chef created a dish, we are saying something that is not 100% correct. Even the most incredible dish, cyber egg, the egg was not created by Scabin. So, Scabin chose an egg by someone, by a farmer, that took the egg from the animal. So, there is a process that starts from nature, if you want to call with another name, that can be nature, that can be God, if you believe in God, that can be something that is before our, we don't create physical food. We cultivate this, we choose this, we help the people. So I think that cuisine can be art if the art begin with the production. So a good farmer is an artist. A good fisherman is an artist. And the chef and cook also an artist, but as a part of the process. And also, of course, the chef is the front man of all the process that go on stage and say, well, I am the star. But without the first part, there is no chef, there is no cook. So the selection of cook can be good in selecting the product and so. But then, after the chef, there is the audience. People that are eating are part of the artistic performance. If you eat with attention, you can create art with this food. But if you eat with indifference or without attention or nothing, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Because food is not something that you can say, well, I am distracted. I will leave this here and I will come. No, if you go to an art exhibition and you start to argue with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you say, okay, let's go tomorrow to the art exhibition because now we have argued. But if you are in a restaurant or and you start to eat and you argue with someone, blah, blah, and you don't pay attention to what you are eating, you cannot say, okay, I will eat tomorrow, no? Because the experience is now. So you are part of the experience. And also, for example, if you take a pasta and you eat it in 1 minute, or if you wait 10 minutes, the timing in which you eat affects the perception. If you have a raviolo and you cut in 4 pieces, your perception of raviolo is one thing. If you eat the raviolo all at once, it is a different perception. This is also from a scientific point of view. So you are part of this game very actively. And this is why it's a collaboration of many different actors. It's not just the cook in this process. And then in the end, cuisine can be art if it is meant as environmental and convivial art. I think that this process finds his final definition as convivial art, environmental art. Cuisine is an art in which everyone is involved and is a sort of plural artifice. We should try to overcross this typical individualistic approach of modern art that say that you alone and the work of art in front of you, and there is just a direct univocal relation. When the restaurants were invented in 18th century, they started to be modeled in this way. There is an artist, the chef, a work of art, the plate, and you. But as we have seen this morning for taste also, things are much more complicated. There is an environment, rumors, sounds, the people that you are eating with, the time you are eating, and a lot of very different multiple aspects. It's not just a relation between you and the plate. This is very naive to think this. And so there is an environmental space with an atmosphere that is very important for the appreciation of eating. There are studies that shows that when people go to a restaurant, 25% of the appreciation, maximum 30%, is about the food, and 70% is about the environment. And sometimes people is not aware of this. But now there are some top chefs that are creating courses and workshop for this choreography specialist. The right music, the right light, and of course the environment. Everything is very important. So this conviviality in the etymological sense of term is really the maximum importance for this experience. So this experience can be artistic if we go toward this new concept of art, and let's see, what time is it? I think it's time to stop because I spoke more than 1 hour. I'm sorry, maybe I was a little bit too long, but thank you very much for your patience and attention. Maybe there are some questions, clarification, observations, inquiries. I don't know if we have time, but I am here until you want to stay.
Just to thank you for your presentation and for your
Thank you very much.
This is something related to our university.
Oh.
This is a painting of our university.
Beautiful.
Specially made for the 10th anniversary. You see the Özyeğin. So maybe.
Very nice. Thank you.
I have a photograph. Yes.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
So now let's take questions.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
You mentioned that it is a character of late modernity or late capitalism, this need of continuous emotion. And so that comes out of the understanding of food and cuisine. But do you think the same character can be applied to the other arts, such as design, painting, cinema, literature? So is it more general than just food?
Yeah. Yes, sure. It is. Thank you for the question. It's a general atmosphere. It is called, some scholars call this the age of capitalist aesthetics. That means that people in different fields need to create always some new tools or ideas in order to be heard and to be to pay attention to what they do. And this is something that, for example, in this kind of restaurants that I mentioned before, these restaurants of this fine dining scene, avant-garde, I've spoken sometimes personally to chefs that confessed me, well, I have to create always something new because otherwise people will not be interested in what I do. So sometimes it's a sort of fake research, it's a sort of fake creation. It's not something that comes from what they really feel as urgent, but it's just a marketing operation. This is very bad to say. It's not always like that, but sometimes there is this connection between the market and the creation. Also in design, also in movies. Sometimes movies, if you make a movie today that is very slow, you don't go to Hollywood or to the major distributions because you have to follow a certain rhythm. Because, as I told before, the perception of people is today oriented even in a very physiological way toward a certain timing that must be fast, continuous production of images and so. So it is true. It is. I think this is valid for all the, and this is why, by counterpart, a lot of new technique about meditation, yoga, and other forms are so successful to balance this, no? To balance this. It's like obesity. People eat too much, and they need to go to the gym. And they eat a lot, and they start to run, to make running. It's a sort of exaggeration, no? So this, so you create the counterpart. I think you are right. Yeah.
One other question, anyway. One last question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, well, we have discussed when food can be an art, but there are lots of people lacking food and starving and dying. So can we say that the peak point will be considering that it will be art when everyone can access food? Would you agree that?
Of course, when we talk about art, we are not talking about people that are starving, even if I think that art, in the sense that I use this term, is not frivolous, is not something accessory. It's something that is very much about a way to express some needs. So art has to do with this need of expression, and as much as you have food to cook, you are in this situation. Of course, if we talk about people that are starving and the question of access to food, it's a different story. On the same time, I think that sometimes there is an alibi to say that we don't have to mind too much about food as culture or as a vehicle of communication, because there are people that are starving, so we have just to give them food. I don't think that two things are in contradiction. We have to reduce the injustice, because people are starving because not because of food as art. People are starving for other reasons that find, for me, motivations in the system. So I think that there are different questions, as you said, but I would not say that the question that we discussed today is totally irrelevant, because as much as I try to think that question, it involves a lot also a critique of capitalistic system and art in the capitalistic system, and so it's also a political question. And I would put these two things. Art, why art? Because art is the most powerful means for communication. And food it's a very powerful means of communication. There is a chef, there are paradoxes, you are right. There is a chef that is the most famous chef, one of the most famous chef in the world. It's called Massimo Bottura, he's Italian. So he has a very top restaurant, and he is involved now, he's creating a lot of center in the world for people that don't have food, homeless, very poor people. It's called Food for Soul projects. And it's quite, of course, it doesn't solve the problem of the hunger in the world, but it focused the attention on something. I don't know if it is resolutive, I don't think so, but this is a way to say, well, what I'm doing is not just for status elitist people, but I try also to give a help for something that is much more important than this. So this is my reflection. Of course, nourishing people is more important, but nourishing people in a good way is important as well, because otherwise you give people the way the thing that we don't eat here, the waste, the awful food, the junk food, just because they have to eat. And I think it's not fair as well.
Thank you very much. Professor Perullo, there is art, but there are some facts of real life going on. May I ask for your pardon, please, for few students that we have at the back who are there, but thinking always of the food that they will have to prepare for a la carte this evening, and the trial run, So, would you mind if we would excuse those students to leave and go on with their work?
Of course,
Aren't you kind?
Thank you.
Gracias. A la carte gitmek durumunda olanlar, derslere olanlar.
Yesterday we were eating there. Yesterday night I tried the menu.
You did?
Yes,
So they
was good.
Çocuklar, sadece dersi olanlar çıksınlar, geri kalanlar beklesinler. Gitmeyin, ayağa kalkmayın, gitmeyin. Of the seminar course, since that was a good question, Sinan, that you did. Doğan, I think you have a question too. We'll continue with your kind permission with one or two more questions.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Seminar class course students.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentations. My question is, we have lots of successful chefs in the world. Should every successful chef try to make an art when they cook, or should art or food be exclusive?
No, the first. I don't think that should be exclusive. Some of the most successful chefs in the world, they think that they are not making art. I think that they can. I think that we should try to think of art in a different way. For me and other people much more important than me, philosophers and writers, art is not something that is there. There was an artist in the 70s called Joseph Beuys, very famous German artist. And he said once, when a human being meets aesthetics, in that moment, this human being is an artist. So everyone can be an artist. We should stop thinking of art as something that is a way of different from everyday life. Because in this way, there will be the elite idea of art. Art is for a few people. Most people just live. I think that food is an important way, a strategic tool to have a different relationship. Because even very simple food, if you grow a vegetable, if you grow a carrot, you grow this with care, you cultivate, you cook this, and you offer this to your people. This is what Joseph Beuys meant with art of everyday life. Because you create something with care, with attention, with sensibility. And it can be also very simple. It can be a simple plate of beans and potatoes. You don't have to create special dishes. This is also can be also very particular things. But both of them. So I think that we should stop thinking of art as something that is exclusivist. I am against the exclusivist theory of art, and I am for an inclusivist theory of art. Art can be anything today, and so the experience of art is accessible to everyone. It's a matter of awareness. It's a matter of sensibility and care. It's nothing else than this. This is what I mean by art, of course. Other people think in a different way.
Thank you for your answer, Mr. Perullo.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't have a question.
Yes.
Do you think that food art, like trying to be artistic in the kitchen, creates food waste? Because you don't always present the non-aesthetic part of food on your plate?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part.
Slower but louder.
Slower.
Slower but louder.
Can we say that food art leads to food waste because the non-aesthetic part of food is not presented?
Food waste.
Yes.
Good question, yeah. We were talking about this morning. I can answer in this way. I think yes, and this has to do with the relation between art and responsibility. I think that today, also many artists are aware of the fact that they are not free to do whatever they want, but they have a responsibility. And some chefs, especially the famous chefs, they know that they are stars, and so they also bring a responsibility. So if you make a project, for example, with food that concern also food waste, that doesn't waste anything from the plate, that you don't. I have a student from Pakistan in my PhD, and once I went with him in a restaurant, in a very fancy Western restaurant with 15 different plates, 15 different glasses, a lot, and he told me, well, yes, but we think that all this is a big waste. Why you have to use 25 different plates, 25 different glasses, 25 different... Their idea of what is elegant or not is different. They don't, in this, he comes from a village in North Pakistan, in the mountains, and he has a totally different culture of food and eating. And this idea of having so much waste with a lot of options, with a lot of possibilities, with a lot of choices, he found this a totally waste that is not necessary. And of course, I come from a different culture, a situation, but this makes me think a lot. Of course, I don't think that he's right and we are wrong, but we can mix maybe a little bit more and become more open to, and this also has to do with access of food. I mean, today, in the 21st, when everything is connected, I think that we cannot think of a restaurant in the same way that we did in the 18th century. When there were different situations, we didn't know a lot about other cultures. And today, if you manage a restaurant or you make some dishes, you have to think in this way. And you are a good artist if you think in this way. So I think that there is a connection between art and responsibility, art and engagement, and also food art and engagement and responsibility. You cannot make everything you want just for the sake of something, or maybe this is not the only way to do things. There are things that are, especially food should be treated in this more respectful way. It is a good question also.
Şükriye. Öğrenciler. Nerede, nasıl istiyor?
Fotoğraf çektirmek isteyen çalışıyormuş. So, let's have a photograph together if you want.
Nasıl yapalım? Öğrencileri de.